There's a world out there, it's a digital maze where dollars move in mysterious ways. Complex systems, rules, and regulations. The payments professor sparks revelations. No need to fear the Fed now.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Payments Podium. Of course, I'm Kevin Olsen, the Payments Professor, and today I have got an incredible guest with you. It is actually a very good friend of mine. It is Miss Karen Sylvester. Woo!
Aww.
Karen, say hi. So Karen is here to actually talk about UDAP, but before we get to that, y'all know the number one question we got to start with. Karen, anybody who comes on the Payments Podium, the first time they're here, I always got to ask them, how in the world did you get involved in electronic payments? Because every time I ask that question, only one time, one person did say, when I was a kid, I played banker, and when I got to college, I found out about electronic banking, and that was my major. And I was like, really? Nobody else has ever said that. So how did you end up in electronic banking?
So what if my story is kind of like that, though?
No way.
Yeah, well, I actually started as a part-time teller at a bank when I was very, very young. I've been in the industry for a long time. I don't know. Started off as a teller. I did all those extra jobs to like get more money, get more hours. And somehow I ended up in operations. And we had some changes at the bank. And at one point, our VP of operations came to me and she handed me the ACH rules book. And she said, "Hey, can you learn this?" And I was like, "What is it?" And she was like, "It's ACH." And I was like, "What's that?" And she said, like direct deposit, like your paycheck. And I was like, "Oh." And the ACH rules book, it's not thin. And I was like, "Sure, I'll learn it." And I literally sat down and read the ACH rules book. There aren't.
All right, your story wasn't a plan to go do it, though.
No, it wasn't. But I do not come from a family of bankers. My sister happens to work at a bank also, but we don't come from a family. It's just her and I that are the bankers. And we've been in it for a really long time. So I guess there's some passion in there. Oh.
Well, I'm not much different. I don't know if you know, the first day I had to read the ACH rules book, I cried and figured I would be fired by the end of the week.
Oh, well, they didn't fire me. They just kept keeping me there.
But it's actually a common story. That's how a lot of people get in here. And then all of a sudden we find we like it. It's a wonderful world of electronic banking.
It's kind of creepy how cool it is.
It is.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, we get to talk today about a really unique part of it, the UDAP. I mean, and people say UDAP, and I have people go, "What's that? Is that like some new hip words that the kids are doing? Is it like the toodles and skizzles or totes or whatever?"
So
I don't even know the words.
I used to work for another company that I work for now, that I don't work for now, but we had a thing called the UDAP rap.
I've heard the UDAP rap.
One of my coworkers actually created the UDAP rap, and we used it for years. And
actually, Jordan, years ago at Umacha, did a UDAP rap in front of everybody. He did it. It was great.
They better not have stole ours.
Well, I don't know. It was years ago. I would gander to say it started there. Just saying.
Oh, whatever.
But anyway, what is UDAP? That's the number one question. What in the world is UDAP?
So here's UDAP. It's kind of like electronic payments. It has like different meanings depending on where you're talking about. So there's actually two UDAPs. There's UDAP with 1A and there's UDAP with 2As. UDAP with 1A is the original UDAP. And UDAP with 1A actually has oversight from the FTC, or the Federal Trade Commission. And it's UDAP from a business perspective. So all those businesses out there that do stuff, they have a responsibility to do things in a particular manner, make things clear. And now the new UDAP with 2As is oversight by the CFPB, or the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. And theirs is more about the financial institutions and what financial institutions are doing, which is how it impacts payments.
Okay, so I got a feeling the 1A doesn't apply to us as much, but AA does apply with the CFPB.
Well, the 1A doesn't apply as much, but it still has a lot of things that keep coming into the 2A part. So if you want to know like the whole story, you like have to know both pieces of it, but you can really focus on the 2A part for payments, at least right now.
Okay, I'm curious now. I didn't know about the 1A. I only knew about the 2A. And I've known about the 2A for a long time, but I didn't know about the 1A. And I didn't know that this conversation would turn out to be like we're in Minnesota, eh? I
Hey,
mean, it's all about A. I mean,
if we get to the
so what,
AAA
again,
part,
what's the difference?
so the 1A part, the UDAP with 1A, is the Federal Trade Commission. And like what has been in the news recently for them has been some information that's come out from the Federal Trade Commission, some guidance, some possible rules that are coming out about being clear and conspicuous about fees, which is also rolls into the 2A part as well. But they're specifically focused, like within the last few weeks, has been on like the short term stay places, aka Airbnbs, and making sure that the fees for those are disclosed up front. Because how many times have people stayed in one of those short term places, and then all of a sudden there's a cleaning fee and there's a hot tub fee and there's a da, and that has been a problem. The other one that is under the radar right now are the ticket sales. So you think about the popular concerts these days, and you think you're buying a ticket for $80, and by the time you try to check out, it's $160, and you're like, what in the world just happened? And that doesn't even include parking. So they have had a huge focus on that part, but it's all about being clear and conspicuous, putting those things up front, which also is what CFPB and the UDAP with 2As is coming.
Okay, as somebody who did buy tickets, I mean, for Christmas, my kids got tickets for AC/DC and Metallica this year. I would,
And you're taking me? What?
of course, Metallica's a 2-night event too. I don't know if I can handle 2
I'm
nights.
coming. I'm coming to Florida.
But I get that one. I'm going through. I'm like, hey, that's not so bad. I go to checkout and I went, what happened?
Yeah.
Wait a minute, what happened? This like the price, it seemed like doubled
Yeah.
by the time I went to checkout because I do have 4 kids, so it's like, are you kidding me?
Yeah. My cousin and I went to Alan Jackson's last tour, his last chance or last call tour, and original ticket prices when we bought the tickets the first time was $60.
Not bad.
Well, yeah, things got canceled, so they gave us money back, and then they put the tickets back out there again, and they were $160. And by the time we all got like said and done, it was like, what in the world just happened? However, it's Alan Jackson's last call tour, so we got to go.
What do you do?
Yeah, we paid and we saw and we loved it.
Okay, so FTC 1A UDAP is looking at that.
Yes.
Let's go now because I say CFPB, it makes me cringe a little bit.
Aw.
I like the CFPB, but they also scare me a little bit sometimes. I think they overreach, just my opinion, but I also know they must be there. So CFPB AA UDAP, what is that one?
So that is Abusive Acts and Practices. So they add an additional letter in there. Essentially the same thing, but their focus is all on financial institutions. So from a financial institution perspective, for those of us who have been in the industry for quite some time, things that we have done for years is no longer okay. And something that the CFPB has been on financial institutions about, especially like within the last few years, is all the fees. You think about NSF fees, overdraft fees, return check fees, all of those fees we've been charging. It's been okay. And somehow along the line, it's not okay. And so they've put guidance out there, whichever makes everybody scramble. And you're like, oh, okay, what do we do now? How do we survive on like just holding these accounts? Like,
All right, hold on, because I want to point out something on just that for the listeners who aren't in the banking industry, because sometimes I do get that. And one thing, when it comes to those fees, I've heard people say, a bank should never charge me any fees. But I have to tell them, when it comes to like NSF, you spent money you didn't have.
Yeah.
So that's not right. And return checks, it took a person to do an action to make something happen. And I've even heard the argument too, some of that's automated. The bank paid for that software. And if you check out the price of banking software, because of what it does and how it works, it's not cheap.
the only thing I
Some
see,
of these fees.
yeah, the only thing I see about like the return check fees or the return item fees is that is a fee that's charged to the depositor. But the depositor had no idea that it was going to come back. So is that fair? I can see that.
Well, in that case, I think they should use FedNow. Just saying.
There's your options. I mean, there are other options out there too now, but that's a good point.
My opinion, but also people get upset if you say they're going to take away their checks. So, but when they're talking about the fees, is it a case of eliminating or making them reasonable? Because that's the other side. I can also say I've seen that too. Like you say, the depositor getting charged back for the check fee. And $50? Come on, that's not right. It's not taking that much effort or work, and it should be a reasonable fee. I get the argument that it's a deterrent or tries to
Yeah.
be too, but like you just said, it's not in their control.
Well, and I think that's what it comes down to. What's reasonable? So when you talk about like the return fees, is it fair? Probably not. They're going to have other consequences behind that customer service aspect of life versus like if you have an overdraft or an NSF fee. As a consumer, as somebody who has done the action and like charged the transaction, and I didn't have the money for it. Oh, wait, let's go back to old school. You're supposed to have money in your account before you actually write a check or you use your debit card or you do an instant payment or, whatever. How do we get back to that?
Agreed. Well, the catch is though too, it's not the CRFPB. It's not the Consumer Reasonable Financial Protection Bureau. It is the CFPB. So, what is it they've actually said when it comes to those different fees, or what's the hot item of the day?
So the CFPB is all about being reasonable. And there have been a few pieces where you're like, that's not fair. But then their most recent actions have been reasonable. So they put out some I don't know if I can't remember if it was a request for comment or a guidance recently, but it was all about like credit card fees and if you are late payments and whether those late payments should be X amount of dollars or if they should be, a little X amount of dollars. So what's the difference? And they did put some guidance in there in their last piece, dollar amount that said, like an overdraft or a late payment fee should, I think it was either $5 or $8. Um, you know, what's reasonable, but what is reasonable and actually like compensates that company for the action.
Well, it's interesting. Once you mention the guidance, there's something I got to say because me, I focus on faster payments. I mean, I know a little bit about everything. It seems like I'm a jack of all payment trades
Right.
is the way to be able to put it. But I really do focus more on faster payments. And there is an FAQ from the CFPB on faster payments. And I tell everybody that is a recommendation. And they're like, what? And I tell them the FAQs or the guidances, even like you're mentioning, for anybody listening, you should treat it like a regulation, but they really are more recommendations. So I call it a recommendation.
And that is really a hard part for the financial industry at this point is that there's been a lot of guidance that's been pushed out there and that guidance becomes the way it is. So you have to pay attention to it. You may not like it and you may not like act upon it quickly, but once those exam times come along, if the guidance is out there, those examiners have probably been briefed on it and they either will ask you to fix it, they will ask you to do some type of compensation back to your account holders that you have charged those fees to. And you can like have your case about what is reasonable and what your financial institution does, but that doesn't necessarily mean that's going to fly with the examiner. So you have to pay attention to all of it.
Oh, and paying it back. Actually, just today, there is an article out. The CFPB is suing Bank of America, Chase, Capital One, Zelle, all kinds of banks right now because of Zelle activity. We're going to have to pay attention to see what that. But let's get back to UDAP. So UDAP is what? Deceptive acts and practices, unacceptable deceptive acts and practices, right? Whatever that people are doing here. The AA one.
Yeah.
And it is enforced mainly by the CFPB then, right?
So the CFPB has oversight over the larger financial institutions, but they could come back to the smaller financial institutions also. And consumers can make complaints to the CFPB, and then they roll down to your regulator, who then passes them down to you. So the CFPB could be involved. There is a way on the CFPB's website for a consumer to complain about their financial institution.
Ooh. All right. So what is a financial institution to do to make sure that they don't violate UDAP?
That's a great question. So there's lots of things they can do. One of probably the best things they can do is have clear disclosures. They can make sure that those disclosures tell everything. The other part is their marketing.
Whoa, I got to stop you on the disclosures right
Okay.
away. I have, asked people who work in the banking industry, have you read the disclosure? And I mean, I've asked this in groups of hundreds of people. Come on, raise your hand if you read the entire disclosure. And, yes, I know you're going to. I did a couple of times
Mhm.
too.
And you
But
hate,
at the same
and you
time,
hate
how
every
many
minute
of
of
us
it.
have been presented one we didn't read?
Right.
Because, like you just said, put everything in there, but I like clear and concise. Those are words that I jump on right away. I'm like, these things are written by lawyers. And they bring, oh my, I mean, talk about putting everything in there. They cure insomnia.
You need to be a compliance officer who gets the pleasure of reading not only regulations, but also disclosures on a regular basis.
Yeah, actually, I do know. When I ask that question, you raise your hand because you do it on a regular
Mhm.
basis. Bless you.
Somebody has to do it. But I will be the first to admit when it comes to maybe getting something and they tell you to acknowledge the disclosure, I'm a scroll on past it.
And see, that's my thing is I know that's
I
why it's there, but it's one of those things that we are all going. I mean, they've even in some cases, I'm not saying in the banking industry, I've seen it though, but I've seen it in many other
Mhm.
places where they'll have a button that says scroll to the end just so
um
you can
I
accept it and move on.
I legit saw that just the other day. I was helping my parents do something on maybe one of their mobile devices, and that's what it was. It was a button to hit that so they could scroll to the end.
So, okay, what I'm getting to is I know it's to prevent unfair, deceptive acts and practices from taking place. And really, folks, for you listening, what that really equals to is, when you feel like, hey, that was just, I got wrong. That shouldn't have happened. That's what that is. That's what we're trying to avoid. Or
Absolutely.
you sit there and wonder, how come I didn't get to use that app, but somebody else gets to use that app? That's what this is too,
Mhm.
especially in the banking industry. Like, for example, there are what we call higher risk practices or apps that we have that we don't let everybody use because you're a higher risk. And that's what those disclosures are actually saying and telling you. Wouldn't it be better if maybe it was like more interactive and just hit the highlights and in layman's knowledge? I
Well,
mean, granted, I don't know if we want to tell somebody you're high risk.
right. Because, that just leads to all kinds of other things as well. But then I think if you don't have all the details behind it, you have just the highlights, then like what else was in there? What did we miss? So I don't know. I think it's a catch 22 there as well. So I think you go back to what your marketing and your advertising says and make sure that those are the highlights, but then also like the disclosures back behind it. So when I get back home, I have an opportunity to like read the details behind it. And so many places they ask you, well, do you want the disclosures printed? Um, Probably not. But if you send them to my email, I'm not going to read them either. So how do we like then get people to really understand what they're actually getting into? And,
How about this? What's actually in those disclosures that is showing, hey, we're not doing anything deceptive
right.
that a consumer should be aware of? Because that's the other thing I've been reading them, I like to point out is like I was just mentioning, hey, we determined you're high risk. Does it say in that disclosure what those types of activities are, what things are that would say you're high risk? This is why we won't let you do it?
But you don't want to classify people either. So I don't know. I don't know if there's a simple answer to all of this by any means. I think the biggest thing you have going on is making sure that whatever you're doing is clear and concise. It is put out there. You put things that people will actually understand. And that's a big piece too. You talked about the disclosures being written by the lawyers, but at the same time, things have to be understandable for the person that's actually going to read it. And, some people aren't as highly educated, can't read that stuff. I personally, like when I read the regulations, I'm not going to lie. I literally take my finger and I have to. And I read better on paper. So, like knowing those things about yourself too, I think there's some consumer personal responsibility that goes along with this. CFPB probably wouldn't agree with me, but as a consumer, like making sure that you actually take the time to understand what you're really getting into. And you can point the blame at whoever later on, but at the end of the day, it's still on you.
You know, okay, that's a good point. It is still on them.
Mm-hmm.
It is still going to be on them, and they should take the time to do this. But I got to also tell everybody out there, you and I share a couple of superpowers together.
Do we?
All right. First of all, yeah, you and I, we both love dogs.
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean, we probably both have more dogs than one person should have in their house. I mean, I got 4 downstairs right now at the
Maybe some
moment.
of us need more.
I mean, maybe some of us have the heart for more. That is what it comes
Yes.
down to. And I love them. I do. I love my dogs. But the other thing is we have this superpower where we can actually read regulations and tell you what it is in English.
Mhm.
And what I want to point out is for those of you out there, you should be reading those things. And those of you even in the industry, not necessarily out of the industry, there are people like Karen and I, there are payment associations that are out there that will help you with understanding what it's saying. But also, this is where we got to say, always consult your legal counsel.
Right. I am not a lawyer, nor do I play one on TV.
Me neither. I have to put that in everything.
Yeah.
I mean, again, this is just for educational purposes to be able to help
Absolutely.
everybody. So again, reading that, and you said keywords like clear and concise. I know to focus in on those words that and it's like commercially reasonable. There are terms that we have in the industry that they are there for a reason. One side that I hope everybody understands too is UDAP is got rules and guidance so that the financial institution can offer products and services in a way that they can make money because
Right.
they're a business, folks. Like it or not, at the end of the day, they need to make money to be able to operate
Well, they got to be able
and
to make
do
money to
so
pay their
correctly.
employees too.
Yeah, for people to be able to have jobs
Yeah.
so that you have a banking
Yeah.
system. But on the other end, do it in a way that is fair and nobody's getting cheated.
Mm-hmm. And that's really what it comes down to is what is reasonable. And what may be reasonable to you and I may not be reasonable with somebody else, but that also gives us an opportunity to have clear things and have that consumer be able to shop around. And that has been something that the CFPB has talked about also, is to make sure that you go check out other alternatives and have comparisons of like comparable products to make sure that what you are getting yourself into is what you can truly handle.
Okay, that is a really huge point. In the US, there are over 9,000 financial institutions. You have options.
Mhm.
You go to other countries, and I mean talking some large countries, there's less than 10, less than 20 in some cases. We've got 9,000. So you do have options that are out there. I also know, though, the CFPB has done things here even recently, what Dodd-Frank 1033 recently, just a couple of months ago, to be able to make it easier for a consumer to have access to their data, which should lead to what we call open banking and make it easier to move your account too.
There's that, but then there's that other side of that of like, how do we do it? Those little details haven't quite been figured out yet. So it's out there, it's pending. Then my fraud side kicks into me and says,
Yes.
how do we protect the information? Oh, sure, we can share it, but wait, then how do we protect it? And I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what I've told people too is yes, I understand you want to be able to do this. Do you understand that by us enabling you to do this, we also enable fraudsters to make it easier to steal your money?
Yeah.
And they're like, whoa, that's not fair. And we're, yeah.
Right.
That's the conundrum that we're in is there's, everybody, there's the security friction, the level of security friction that is considered acceptable. We've got to have security to the point that it protects you, but we can't have security to the point that you can't actually use the product or service.
How do we fix it all, Kevin? How do we fix it?
Well, as soon as we figure that out, we'll both be able to easily
Yes.
retire and get more dogs. What else should though people know about UDAP? I mean, what would be number one thing you'd say when it comes to UDAP, especially financial institutions? This is the one thing I think you should be aware of.
So, as I did a little update to myself before having this conversation with Kevin this morning. I'm not gonna. I want to make sure I'm prepared. Make sure I got my ducks in a row there. But one of the things that the CFPB has within the UDAP is to have the 4 Ps. And the 4 Ps are prominent, presented, placement, and proximity. So when we put things out there, make sure that we are putting them out there so that we're not trying to be deceptive. Those 4 Ps are all about being deceptive. So if you make sure that things are prominent, like we're not trying to have like little font out there with whatever the fees are. If you present the information, especially like your frontline staff who's presenting that information, make sure that they present it in a way that is the person can understand. And then make sure the placement of all of those informations is out there. Also think about placement from your website perspective. Is it easy to navigate? Can you figure it out? And then also the proximity, like how close are things? If you have ever gone and done, those are my fellow financial institution people. Have you ever gone and looked at all the disclosures and all the notices that you have to have out there? They have to be in a certain proximity of whatever the act is. So you might have like an FDIC piece that says we're covered by the FDIC. You may have something about the CIP information and collecting personal information, and this is why we have to do it. So proximity. Is it all right there? Are you putting it out there easy to find?
This has been an interesting conversation. We started off with AA, went through the CFPB, and now got to the 4 Ps. It's been a definite alphabet soup here galore. And when it comes to alphabet soup too, I know you've got a lot of different certifications. And I also got to say, you've been a dear friend for years, and you've been an inspiration because you keep getting better and smarter all the time. And a lot of people that watch the show know that when we're getting to the end, the professor always asks, hey, what is it that you would tell people that are listening to be able to have the successful career you've had? Like, what's the advice that you would give if you were mentoring somebody, or that somebody's that's listening, that you'd say, if you want to be successful in this industry, do this?
I think we could go back to the topic, UDAP. Be fair. Don't be deceptive. Don't abuse what you have. And make sure you practice what you preach. So, like, I started in the industry as a part-time teller. I have worked in quite a few different places. Well, a few different places in my career. I'm still hanging out with my career here in the financial industry. And take those opportunities to learn things. Take the junk jobs that nobody wants. I'm telling you, it will take you places.
I like that. Don't be deceptive. Don't abuse what you have, for sure. Be grateful for what you have at all times. Practice what you preach. I'm with you. Congruence is so important. And yeah, take different jobs and see what it's like from all perspectives. Karen, thank you so much for being on today. You have been an incredible guest. This has been one of those podcasts that I look forward to them all, but I look forward to this one a little bit more than normal. And for those of you listening, that if you've got questions, you got concerns, you can actually find Karen out on LinkedIn, or you can come directly to me and I will get you in contact as needed. And if there's a topic or if there's a presenter you think needs to be on the Payments Podium, email me, Kevin@paymentsprofessor.com. I'll do all I can to make sure that we get that person or we get that topic taken care of. But for now, class dismissed.
There's a world out there, it's a digital maze where dollars move in mysterious ways. Complex systems, rules, and regulations. The Payments Professor sparks revel.